Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Black Financial Podcast. I am your host, Lawrence Watkins. I am the president and chief operating officer of the Black Business School. And today, our very special guest is Kemlia Reed Sherman. Kim is the founder and managing partner of Reed Sherman Law Firm. It is a family law, estate planning, and probate firm that protects family relationships, secures their wealth, and also secures their legacy as well. You can find out more about her company at reedshermanlaw.com. That is reedshermanlaw.com. I'll put the link in the description and yeah, check her out. And today we're talking about how to secure your family's wealth during the pandemic. So, Kim, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Lawrence. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, doing excellent. Another beautiful day down here in Medellin, Colombia. But I want to talk a little bit more about your business. So, can you tell the audience a little bit about Reed Sherman Law and how did you get to this point in your career of actually managing this law firm?
Sure. Well, when I was 13, I had an experience where had to go before the court for a family matter, and I took it upon myself to implement this situation. I'll call it a situation, and it was that experience that gave me the desire to become a family law attorney. I decided that I'm going to be an attorney, and I'm going to help people like me. Of course, I was 13. I came from very modest backgrounds, and no one in my family had attended college. So the idea of me being from a small southern town, and I also said I was going to go to Georgetown University. Being from a small southern town, modest means no one knew how I was going to get there. I didn't even know how I was going to get there, but I knew that I was going to get there. I ended up joining the military because I knew that that was my opportunity to get not only serve my country, but also to get the opportunity to get an education. 10 years, after 7 years, I got assigned to the DC area. And then I decided, you know what? Now is my time to get out. Georgetown is here. I'm going to get out. I'm going to go to Georgetown. Everybody thought I was kind of crazy because after 10 years, normally people do the next 10 and secure their retirement. I had done 10 years and some months, and I said, I'm going to get out. Got out. I applied to one college, Georgetown University. Everybody was like, well, how do you know you're going to get in? I said, I'm going to get into this college. I'm going to get into this college. Went to Georgetown, graduated in 2.5 years. After I graduated, I started working as a government consultant. But my heart was, although I always enjoyed the jobs that I had and the opportunities that were afforded to me, but that 13-year-old was always in my ear saying, when are we going to become an attorney? When are we going to become an attorney? So I'm driving. I was a consultant for FBI. So I was I get to my parking lot in my office in particular, and I was overwhelmed with emotions. And I had no idea. And I could still hear that little voice saying, we're going to become an attorney. We're going to become an attorney. So I went in, I got through my day. I went home. I talked to my husband. He said, quit your job and go to law school. And at this time, I'm like, I was thinking about maybe going part-time and keeping my job. He said, quit and go to law school. That's what I did. I applied and I went to law school. And during law school, one of my favorite classes was Wills, Trust, and Estate. And I decided, I would call my best friend on the weekends, telling her about things that, she probably doesn't care about, but I was really excited about it. But I knew that that was an area of law that I wanted to practice. When I first started law school, I was going to go and do family law, which, I do family law and estate planning. But another reason that I do estate planning is because when I was growing up, when I was in the military, my family had to make a very difficult decision to remove my grandmother from life support. It was 9 siblings at the time. And if you can imagine, that was not only was it a difficult decision, but it was difficult to get 9 people to make a decision about anything. So that was difficult in itself. In addition to that, I'd watched my grandmother work really, really hard to buy her first home. And during the time when she bought her first home, she also got married the very same day that she moved into her home. To make a long story short, my grandmother didn't have an estate plan like most African Americans, like 70% of African Americans. She didn't have an estate plan. And when she got married, she had a blended family. When she transitioned, her husband inherited the home due to the state's laws, which is fair. But when he transitioned, his kids inherited the home. So the home that my grandmother had worked so hard for was lost to kids that weren't hers and kids that didn't even want the home. So in the end, the home was just lost to strangers, right? So my grandmother had worked so hard. But what I did know when I was going through law school, I started to reflect on, my experience, and I recognized that, as I said, 70% of African Americans don't have estate plans. But what I also realized is that a lot of our wealth is lost due to the fact that we don't have estate plans. And when I hear the stories, when I have the clients come in, when I read the stories, because I do a lot of research about wealth and Black wealth, because, as it relates to estate planning, and hearing the stories about, hey, Ms. Sherman, my family had 1,200 acres of land and now we don't have any. I received a call, my family had this amount of land and it was taken by these people. And I often tell the story of Mary in South Carolina. She had been living in her parents' home for 40 years. She had inherited the home. She'd been living in the home for 40 years, paying the taxes, maintaining the home. It was heirs' property. But what she didn't know was that, well, let me back up. She forgot to pay taxes one year. When she realized it, she went to the courthouse to pay the taxes, but it was too late because they'd already put a lien on the property. And there was not a whole lot, well, there was nothing that she could do about it because she could not prove legal ownership. And the reason that she couldn't prove legal ownership was because she didn't go through the probate process. Everybody thinks about, probate as the big bad monster. And there are some reasons why you want to avoid probate. But one of the purposes of probate is to transfer legal ownership of your assets. And most states have a statutory time frame after the person transitions that you have to go through the probate process. She had been living in the home for 40 years. She had long exceeded the statutory time frame. And what happened was a local politician who owned luxury resort adjacent to her property came in and purchased the property for pennies on the dollar. These are stories that I hear all the time, and lack of estate planning is one of the biggest contributors to the racial wealth gap. So that's why I do what I do. Part of my my firm's mission is to educate and empower our community, to give them the tools, to give them the resources, because we rely on what happened to our next door neighbor. We rely on what we think and how we think the law should work. And oftentimes we don't realize it until it's too late. In the case of Mary, she had no idea that she needed to go through the probate process. And that just for $82.31, the taxes were $82.30. She lost her family for $82.31.
That's crazy to think about, that one can lose their home for such a small amount of money in terms of quote unquote back taxes in that case. So I have so many questions. I don't know where where do I want to begin? I want to begin, I guess, with your past. I guess let's go back to when you were 13 years old. What was it like going to court at age 13 and trying to go through this process, I guess, as a teenager for whatever battle that you were trying to face at that time?
Well, let me tell you. I'll just tell you the story. I'll share the story. I was born to a teen mom. My father was, he was older, and he was a man of influence and affluence, and but he wasn't providing financially for me. And I, one day, my mom, she did the best that she could, but as a single mom, it was difficult. Sometimes it was difficult. She had to tell me that she did not have the money to do certain things. She was able to provide me the necessities, but not always the niceties. And there was one incident when I'd asked for something and she said she just didn't have the money. So I said, why don't you sue my dad for child support? And she was taken aback because we never had a conversation about my dad. And she said, well, if you want to, then if you fill out the paperwork, I'll sign it. So this was back before the internet. I'm going to date myself a little bit. I go through the yellow pages and I'm calling all these law firms. And of course, no one's going to talk to a 13-year-old that's trying to sue somebody. So I was directed to legal aid. I contacted one attorney and they told me about legal aid. I contacted legal aid and went in, filled out the paperwork. And as promised, my mom signed it. And we started the process. And it was that experience when I decided, this is what I want to do with my life. And it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. I think that's pretty crazy in terms of, I guess, A, the initiative of a teenager to be able to do that, but then B, it seems like you have a, I guess, sense of justice where, well, I shouldn't put words in your mouth. What was, I guess, your motivation in terms of, I guess, suing your dad in this particular instance for not taking care of you? Like, what was your internal emotional motivation for that?
I knew that my mom couldn't force my dad to have a physical relationship with me. I knew that she couldn't force him what I knew was that, and to be honest with you, Lawrence, I don't even know how I knew anything about child support or going to court, because when I reflect back on it, and I've even talked to my mom about it, I didn't know anyone that had sued anyone for child support. And I think this was before the days of, People's Court and Judge Judy and that kind of stuff. But I just thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't think that it was fair that my mom had to struggle and make the sacrifices that she had to make to provide for me when my father had the means and he just didn't have the desire to do so. So that's why I said, this just isn't the right thing to do. I mean, I knew his kids. I knew of him, but and I saw, his family was riding around in luxury vehicles, and my mom was struggling. I just didn't think that was the right thing to do. But ironically, I often get the question, well, Kim, why is it? Because I'm a father's rights advocate. So I always get the question, so why do you represent dads and not fathers and not mothers? It's not even about the adults. It's about the kid. I knew what it was like living a life of having only part of my family, because I didn't have a relationship with my paternal family. I questioned my identity. I attached my self-worth to that. So for me, dads that want access to their kids and that deserve access to their kids, that's why I fight for dads. Because oftentimes, we hear about deadbeat dads, and it annoys me because I know of so many guys that are being denied access to their kids, but they don't have the means or the resources to fight, or they don't even understand what their rights are. They just feel like, I got to pay child support and that's it. And that's why I fight for dads. And let me say this, I'm not so much fighting for the dads than I'm fighting for the kids.
Yeah, and I want to get back to that a little later in terms of just understanding the rights, understanding the systems, because I think all of it is interrelated, whether you're talking about father's rights or you're talking about estate planning. They all have to do with understand like a basic understanding of the legal system and how it actually impacts one's life. So let's talk about that. I mean, you gave the story of the lady who lost her house for literally $82.37 or whatever the number was, right? What type of wealth transfer do you see for people who don't actually have an estate plan? So what does that wealth transfer look like from, I guess, a family level in terms of what's being transferred from Black families to the state or wherever that money goes after they go through the probate process?
Okay, so I'm going to use the Aretha Franklin case before I go to, the average person case. Aretha Franklin, we know she died without an estate plan. They found some handwritten wills after the fact, but because she didn't have an estate plan to protect her assets and to minimize her tax liabilities, her $80 million estate went from 80 million to about 52 million, because after about 11 million, a little over 11 million, you pay 40% in federal estate taxes. So it went from 80 million to 52 million. And in addition to that, there's legal fees, there, just all kinds of fees that you're required to pay when you die without an estate plan. So I hear people say, well, Kim, I don't have $80 million. Even if you don't have $80 million, you want to preserve what you do have. And when we think about estate planning, and I like to think of it more so as legacy planning, because when we think about it in the terms of estate planning, we think about planning for our death. I don't want to do that, because I don't want to think about planning for my death. But, you're planning, you're preserving your legacy. And when I use the story of Aretha Franklin and all the other celebrities, it doesn't matter how great their lives were. There will always be that asterisk of she didn't have an estate plan and her family was fighting in court. Because when you go through the probate process, it's public record. Anybody and everybody can get access to, those documents. So they get to see, exactly, how much wealth you have, what the issues are. So you want to do it also to maintain your privacy. But another thing you want to think about is when we work for our assets, we want to make sure that we protect them and we want to pass them down from generation to generation. And so what, to your question, is when we don't have an estate plan, you run the risk of losing everything that you own. I've had so many families come in and say, my mom had $1 million in assets and we lost it. Because Sometimes it's just lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, and sometimes their emotions outweigh their logic, and they're not thinking about, well, if we have $1 million in assets and there's 4 of us, let's just get along so that we can divide it up by that 4. But what happens is oftentimes, they go to court or they don't go to court, and then the taxes aren't paid on the estate. The debts aren't paid against this that are against the estate. The estate's not settled because people don't understand the process. And then you have the situation where people don't want to go to court because it's like, oh, I don't want to go to probate because probate's this big bad monster. But it's because they don't really understand the purpose of probate, and they don't understand the consequences when they don't go to probate. So you could essentially lose all of your assets. A lot of times I see families lose their family's home because they don't understand what the process is. They don't have an attorney to educate them on the process. So you could essentially lose everything. But normally when you don't have an estate plan, let me say this before I move forward. This is not legal advice. This is for informational purposes only. I am not your attorney. I have to put that disclaimer out there. Don't say Kemlia said. Don't use this for your to make decisions with regards to your estate plan. Now that I have that out. So generally when you die without an estate plan, we often think, I've been married for 20 years. This is my husband. We built everything that we had, so I'm going to inherit everything. That may or may not be the case. If you have a blended family, then you're definitely not going to inherit everything. And there was a situation where the couple had been married for 40 plus years, and the husband died unexpectedly. They had a blended family, and the wife was grieving, the loss of her husband. About 3 or 4 months during that process after he died, the stepkids, and I don't like the term stepkids, but the husband's kids came knocking on the door for their interest in his estate. And this lady at the time was probably in her early 70s. She was almost forced to sell the home in order to give them their share of their estate, the interest in their father's estate. But she was caught off guard and totally surprised because of the fact that she just assumed that, this is my husband, we built this together, it's mine. And that's not always the case. Generally, if you have a family where the couple have kids between the 2 of them and not any kids with someone else, then the spouse may inherit, and it just depends on the state. The spouse may inherit inherit everything. And the reason is because there's a presumption that if the surviving spouse is going to take care of their kids. But if there are kids outside of the relationship, that presumption is not there. And that's why, the estate is divided up in the way that it is if there's a blended family versus if there's not a blended family. But also, Lawrence, you want to think about, because I don't want people to think about estate planning in the context of just dying. I think of estate planning as crisis management, because estate planning isn't just about who gets what when I die. Estate planning is also about what happens if there's a crisis and I don't die. What happens if I am temporarily incapacitated? Who's going to make medical decisions on my behalf if I can't make those decisions? And what medical decisions do I want to be made? Who's going to manage my finances if I can't manage my finances? And sometimes it's temporary and sometimes it's long term. When you have, I see a lot of seniors when they're aging and they start to deal with issues of dementia. If you don't have an estate plan in place, what happens? Oftentimes there's disagreement about who should be in charge, because everybody wants to be in charge. And when they can't come to an agreement, they have to go to court. And even if they can come to an agreement, legally, they have to go to court to be appointed as the guardian of that person or of that person's estate, so that they can have the legal authority to make, financial decisions, to, pay their bills, and to make healthcare decisions. And oftentimes we just kind of just pick somebody because, that's my oldest brother, that's my oldest sister. And sometimes that can be more harmful than not. So you want to make sure that, when you're appointing those personal representatives, that you're thinking of, is this person the right person? Not just, they're my oldest sister. And sometimes even spouses are not, the best candidate for certain things, especially with healthcare. As with healthcare issues, I tell people, think about how this person will respond in a crisis. If your spouse is someone that's going to have a total meltdown and don't have the ability to think, during a crisis, that's not the person that you want to appoint as your healthcare agent, because this can be a matter of life and death.
Mm-hmm.
If the person is indecisive, that may not be the person that you want to have as your healthcare agent. And I'll give you an example that one of my good friends and I, he's an ER physician. He's been an ER physician for 25 years. He shared a story with me that he had a female come into the ER, and she had, she had an infection, but she had signed a DNR, and she had appointed one of her sisters as her.
What's a DNR?
Do not resuscitate.
Okay.
Do not resuscitate, my apologies. And she had appointed her sister as the healthcare agent. However, her sister was not. When the doctor told her sister that, she just has an infection, if you allow me to give her antibiotics, then she'll be fine. But the sister wasn't able to make those decisions because, she was emotionally distraught, and she wanted to wait until the other sister came in and made the decision. Well, by the time that the other sister flew in, it was too late. The sister died. So I share this story with you because I want people to understand that when you're making these decisions, you don't want to just, write it off or, just make it without giving any forethought with regards to the person and the people that are being appointed. You want to make sure that those people are willing to do that job, because some of the responsibilities is time consuming. And I have clients that come in and the person died and they had no idea that they were going to be the executor or the personal representative, and they have no idea what that means and what they're supposed to do. They had a will, my name was in the will, and here I am. What am I supposed to do? So you want to it's important that you educate yourselves and make sure that, you have the proper resources and you understand not only who you're appointing, but if you're being appointed, because you have a fiduciary duty to carry out those responsibilities once you accept them. But on the other hand, if you appoint someone and they decide, hey, I don't want to do this, then now we have a situation as if you didn't have an estate. If you had not appointed someone, family members, friends, whomever, have to go to court and petition the court to be appointed. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's just so much. And I want to dig into, after this quick break, COVID as well, and what type of wrench, I guess, in the system or just with everything does that pose to estate planning. But before I do that, everyone, I'm here with Kemlia Reed Sherman. Kemlia is the founder and managing partner of Reed Sherman Law Firm. Reed Sherman Law Firm is a family law, estate planning, and probate firm that protects family relationships, secures their wealth, and also secures their legacy. You can find out more about her company at reedshermanlaw.com. That is reedshermanlaw.com. And today we're talking about how to secure your family's wealth during the pandemic. If you like what Kim is talking about with regards to estate planning and probate, all those different types of things, please go ahead and press the thumbs up button on YouTube. Please share and subscribe to the Black Financial channel if you'd like to receive more financial content like the content that we're producing today here with Kim. So Kim, let's talk about the pandemic and what have you seen with regards to the pandemic and estate planning?
I think during the pandemic, it's even more critical that people get an estate plan, especially with regards to their medical directives, because family members aren't being allowed to come into the hospital, and doctors won't know what it is that you want. And you have people that have certain religious beliefs, and and I know one is some religions, they don't accept blood transfusions. But if you're incapacitated and you're unable to communicate that with your physicians and it's not in your records, then they're going to do it. They're going to do whatever it is that they need to do to maintain your health. So, and also I tell people often when we're young, we think, I've got time, I don't need to do this. Well, I'm going to share you my personal story, Lawrence. I was young, a young soccer mom, wife, living my best life, working out, I worked out 5 days a week, I had a healthy diet, and on the outside, I appeared very healthy until after a few visits to the doctor, I found out that I had a rare condition and I was not expected to live. So I ended up spending 87 days planning for my death. I was told you need to have surgery immediately, and the odds of you surviving are not that great. I decided, well, I'm not going to expedite it. I wanted to make sure that my affairs were in order, because when I was in the military, I did, and this was prior to me becoming an estate planning attorney. And that's also one of my reasons why I am an estate planning attorney. But during this time, I had a will, because I was like everybody else. I need a will, tell people who's going to get what, whatever. I wanted to protect my assets. But what I found out was that, let me back up. I spent the 87 days, planning my memorial service, writing goodbye letters to my family members, making sure that, all of my accounts, passwords, everything, all the administrative stuff was taken care of. And I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell my husband, because I didn't want them to worry. But I will tell you that that's not the time that you want to start planning for your for a crisis, because there was some days when I was so overwhelmed with emotion that my mental clarity was not there. I couldn't make decisions. I was trying to write a letter. I was trying to write the script for the video that I wanted to leave for my family in lieu of the eulogy, and that was very difficult. But oftentimes people get the call, attorneys get the call, my dad's in the hospital, I need you to come and do his will. This is not anything that you want to just do quickly. It's a process. For me, my process is normally six weeks with my clients, because they have to go through the education process. I don't want them to come in and say, hey, Kim, I need a will, because that's normally what everybody thinks. I need a will. I need to make sure people get my stuff. But what they don't understand is that a will has a purpose, but a will doesn't necessarily preserve your assets in the way that most people want to, because they don't think about all the things about, if, I leave everything to my 18-year-old, they're going to get $500,000. Are they really going to use it for college? Are they really going to buy a house? Are they really going to invest in a business? Probably not at 18. So at 18, they're probably going to go and, live their best life, take lots of vacations, buy all these material things. And by the time they're 25, they're going to be broke. So people don't understand those things. And when I had the will, I remember my experience. It was when I went in the military. I walked into the JAG's office and said, hey, I need a will. I filled out a questionnaire, gave it to them. They completed the template, notarized it, and gave it to me. I still have that will today, just to remind myself that that's not what you want. You want someone that's going to create an estate plan that's going to be unique to your needs, and that's going to take into consideration your goals, your priorities, and your family dynamics. If you have a blended family, your estate plan may be very different than someone else, because there are certain things that you want to take into consideration. But oftentimes we don't know that, and one of the things that I tell people, you also want to make sure that you are hiring an estate planning attorney and not just an attorney that does estate plans. There's a very, very distinct difference. The estate planning attorney, that's normally, their main area of practice, or for me, I do family law, probate, and estate planning. They all intersect, the laws intersect. But if you have an attorney that does estate plans, they may do personal injury, they may do trademark, they may do business law, they may have a list of areas that they serve, but there's no way for them to master every area of the law. Mm-hmm. Even just focusing on estate planning, family law, and probate, there's no way for me to master it, because the laws are forever changing. And that's why every time I get a client, I have to review the law, review the case law, make sure that, everything is consistent. So you want to be careful when you're hiring an attorney, and you want to educate yourself prior to hiring the attorney, because I had one of my friends, she had died, not my friend, my girlfriend, her father died when she was a freshman in college. And she had to be the executor of the estate because, she was an only child and there was no will. She ended up, not knowing how to find an attorney or any of that. So she's 19, living her best life, right? That's a big responsibility. She ended up paying $7,000 for a piece of paper. She contacted this law firm and spoke to the legal assistant, and they said, yeah, he can do that for you. And she wrote the check for $7,000. She never spoke to the attorney. She didn't really know what the
wow.
document was. And she didn't know what she was supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's why you want to educate yourself and understand what it is that you need, because you don't want to go into a law firm, into law office, and they sell you the highest package just because it's the highest package. You want to make sure, or they sell you the lowest package, and that's not necessarily what you need. You want to make sure that you're getting the estate plan that's going to protect you, because it's not just about your family. Because when you're ill and incapacitated, you want to make sure that you got the right people paying your bills. You want to make sure you got the right people that's managing your money, because if not, truth be told, you might wake up or come out of incapacity and have nothing. That power of attorney, you want to be very, very careful when you're signing it and how you execute it. People talk all the time, well, Kim, I can download that off the internet. Yes, you surely can. And you can also download yourself a mess. And the reason
Well, yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit more then, though, right? I mean, two things I really want to hit on before we end today's interview is first is, I guess, the basic components of an estate plan, right? I know you can customize it in different types of ways, but I'm sure there are just certain key things that all estate plans need in some form or fashion. And then I want to talk about how do you go about communicating the estate plan to the people that you love and that love you? Like, what does that look like as well? So let's talk about the components first.
Okay, there are 4 foundational components of an estate plan. You have your will. Everybody's familiar with the will, but they may not be familiar with the purpose of the will. The 4 purposes of a will is to appoint a guardian for your minor children or dependent adults. If you don't have a guardian appointed, your child may end up in foster care. To disinherit family members. To appoint someone to manage your estate after you die. And what's the other one? Appoint. Okay, my brain I just lost it. Appoint the executor of your estate, a minor for your guardian children. Distribute your assets. The thing that everybody remembers, that's the one that I forget, to decide how your assets are going to be distributed. Yeah, that's crazy. So decide how your assets are going to be distributed.
All right, so that's the purpose of the will. So are there other components of the estate plan in addition to the will?
Then you have your power of attorney. Your power of attorney is a legal document that allows you to appoint an agent to act in your shoes, to act in the event that you become incapacitated. That person gets to do all the things legally that you're allowed to do. Be careful when you're appointing a power of attorney, because if you appoint a power of attorney, they can sell your house, they can sell your car, they can take your money. And powers of attorney have done that. And people say, "Oh, I trust them." People change when things happen. And then you have your healthcare agent, your healthcare directive. In some states, they're called a living will or a healthcare power of attorney, a medical directive. It's all the same. What the medical directive does, it allows you to appoint an agent, a healthcare agent, to make medical decisions on your behalf in the event that you're unable to. And it also allows you to create the rules with regards to your medical care, the type of care you do want, the type of care you don't want, and under what circumstances. If you're in a vegetative state, what do you want to happen? At what point do you want that to happen? Who gets to decide? And then you have a trust. The trust is the one that oftentimes we think that you have to have a lot of money in order to need a trust. And the people that have a lot of money have trust because they've had trust and they've transferred that money from generation to generation. A trust allows you to transfer legal ownership from yourself to this legal entity, the trust. I think of it as a box because there's different types of trust. A box. You're taking all of your stuff and you're putting it in the box, and it becomes, the box owns the stuff. Although the box owns it, you still have use, access, and control of it. In the event that you become incapacitated, the instructions with regards to how it's going to be used, accessed, controlled, and by whom are already in the trust. Also, a trust allows you to minimize your tax liabilities, and depending on the type of trust that you have, it also shelters your assets from creditors and predators and everybody else. When we think about leaving our assets to our kids, some of the things that we don't think about is, like, if you have an adult child, and if you transfer those assets in a will, and let's say your child is married and you leave them $500,000 via the will, the spouse may decide, you know what, I'd rather have the $250,000 than to be married to you. So once the money gets commingled, then your child could very well lose half of that $500,000 that you left them, and that wasn't your intent. Also, assets that are left in a will, your heirs may or may not get it, because the debts against the estate have to be paid before your heirs get anything. So if you have $500,000 in your estate and you owe $600,000, guess what? Your heirs aren't going to get anything. But if you have that $500,000 in the box, it's shielded because the estate doesn't own it. The box owns it. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So just to simplify and just go back to the very basics, there are four key components of an estate plan. You have your will, you have your power of attorney, you have your healthcare directive in terms of who you're going to make that, and then you also have, I guess, this trust component as well. I just had a question. You talked about like things like taxes, right, and taxes not being paid on the house, that type of stuff. Do people ever set up trust or like just do things regarding estate planning as like a separate box to pay those things like taxes and other stuff, just to make sure like homes and other property don't get lost?
Well, you can. Estate planning allows you to write whatever rules you want to write, like whatever rules you want to create. But with regards to a trust allows you to minimize your tax liability. And that's why when I talked about Aretha Franklin, had she put her assets in a trust, then it would have minimized her tax liabilities. And again, the trust owns those assets, not the estate.
Yeah, but so what I would want to avoid is, how do I not lose my house over $82.37? Because someone forgot to pay the tax bill for that particular year. So are there like mechanisms in estate planning that can make sure stuff like that doesn't occur?
Absolutely. You can put the money in a trust and just decide how the money is going to be distributed. With a trust, you get to decide how the money is going to be distributed, under what circumstances, at what time. And if you have X amount of dollars, you say, this money goes toward, paying the taxes or what have you. You give the trustee the instructions for how you want those assets to be managed. And, you can put any type of assets. You can put your investments into a trust, any type. You can also put your insurance policy in a trust, name the trust as the beneficiary. One of the other benefits of a trust is if you have a family member that receives government resources. If you get money, the government's not trying to give you any, right? So oftentimes what we have is we'll have an individual that has some type of health challenges, and they're receiving health government benefits, and then their family member dies and they leave them a chunk of money. So the government finds out, and then they disqualify them from that. But what you can create what's called a special needs trust. Put all that money into that special needs trust, and then that your loved one will still have use and access to that money, but they still qualify for those benefits.
You mentioned insurance too. I think that's great in terms of just this, and this is how the wealthy keep their wealth from generation to generation. I think I was listening to an interview by William Doherty, Sandy Doherty. He's a professor at Duke University. He talks about generational wealth and the transfer of wealth, and how that has such an impact on the wealth disparities between, I guess, Black families and white families and so on and so forth, right? And it's because of during those transfers, even so, it's hard enough to get wealth and to create wealth as African American, as a Black person. But then even if you do get the wealth, you're giving a lot of the wealth back to Uncle Sam because you didn't really structure your estate plan correctly, for I guess that transfer as well. But I also want to talk about how things like insurance, you mentioned that a little earlier, how insurance plays into like all of this. So can you talk about that a little bit in terms of like if someone was just starting from scratch, they're 25 years old, 30 years old, let's say they have a family, they have a wife and maybe a son that's a year old or something, and they just haven't thought about any of this stuff. Where would you start? Would you start with, I guess, the insurance piece, the trust piece, or like what would be your methodology to get oneself secure for themselves and their family?
Sometimes it's not necessarily start here and then go there. If you have an insurance policy and you want to make sure that you secure that insurance policy, you can create what's called an irrevocable life insurance trust. And essentially what you do is you name the trust as the beneficiary of the insurance policy. And within the trust, you write the rules with regards to who's going to get what, when, and under what circumstances. If you want that money earmarked for your daughter when she goes to college, then you would write that in your trust. Or if she doesn't go to college, she can invest it in her business. Or, I want this amount to go to buy her first home. You can write the rules with regards to how you want it to be done. So with regards to an insurance policy, you create we call it an ILIT, but irrevocable life insurance trust. And there's different types of trust. So when you're talking to your attorney, you want to make sure that you understand exactly what type of trust you need, because one size does not fit all. So you want to take that into consideration too. When we think about trust fund babies, we think, generally what they have is an irrevocable trust. If you have, let's say you have $1 million and you know that you want to earmark that for your kids, you put that in an irrevocable trust. If you have investments, you put that into an irrevocable trust. If you know that you're not going to need that, and that's specifically for your child, you put it in an irrevocable trust, and that trust, those assets in that trust are shielded from creditors and predators. If you go out and you owe somebody something, or let's say you have to settle a lawsuit, the money that's in that irrevocable trust is not yours. So whatever you have to sell or whatever you have to do to settle that lawsuit, you don't have to go into that irrevocable trust. And that's why people create trust funds for their kids, because if something happens and someone sues me, then my stuff is in a trust. My kid is going to forever have access to this money based on the rules that I've established.
Yeah, and I see that's a power play too, right? And we talk a lot about Black power. We talk a lot about creating our own systems, having a certain level of freedom. And I just think about maybe like all the historical figures, if they had some of these things, set in place. Let's say, MLK had an irrevocable trust. He may have had irrevocable trust for his children, but what would that have looked like in terms of the risk that he could have taken, or just other types of leaders in the Black community? If they had their finances in order, what type of additional power could they have? I guess, amassed and deployed to, benefit the community as a whole, if they knew that their family was going to be taken care of. Something could have happened to them, but if something happened to them, they knew their family was going to be taken care of. What type of different decisions would they have made because they didn't actually need money, or stuff like that? But I think about that, quite a bit too, in terms of just individuals and how like estate planning and generational wealth planning and just the planning for your life and crisis management. How all that kind of just fits together. So
if I can speak to that, one of the other issues that we have is we don't do business succession planning. We will create this successful business and something happens and there's no business succession plan, and then the business folds and the money is lost, stuff like that as well. So
yeah, let's talk about non-financial assets a little bit. So we've been talking about financial assets quite a bit. Talk about non-financial assets and how they fit into one's estate plan. And then also we can just segue that into communicating all of this to your family as well.
Any assets that you own, you can put your automobile, you can put your home, anything that you own, you can put into the trust. Any antiques, anything that you own that is of value, you can transfer it to the trust. And it doesn't have to have a deed. Oftentimes people think, well, in order for me to transfer it, it has to have a deed. It doesn't have to have a deed. There's just a strategy that we create in order for it to transfer.
Well, I'm talking more about things that might have symbolic values, or family heirlooms, things that might have cultural significance to one's family, that type of thing, that provides some type of cultural foundation for your kids and grandkids and great grandkids moving forward, in terms of they know who they are, that type of thing. So go ahead.
Same concept. You just transfer it. Like I said, there's no deed or title to it. That's part of the trust process. You just identify that asset as being part of the trust. So you're also still transferring it, because the trust is, it's a document that you're writing the rules. And if you want, let's say you have a family Bible that's been passed down from generation to generation, you would list that on in your trust. So it's essentially the same. You're still putting your stuff in the box.
Got you. So whatever you want to put in the box, whether it's financial wealth, whether it's cultural or social, type of wealth for your family that you want to pass on to the next generation, it goes in this box called a trust.
If I could speak to that, one of the other things that family legacy, family values, some families will, leave money to their children if they marry within their race, if they marry within their religious beliefs, and that's how they, pass that on. But also, if you want to, your estate plan, what I just told you, those are the four foundational estate planning documents. But you can write, there are a ton of other documents if you want to leave, like, messages, if you want to leave, like, these are our cultural, values, these are the things that I want to be passed down, these are our family stories. Oftentimes stories get lost because we're sharing them orally but not written. So just basically anything that you want to put into your trust, or anything you want with regards to your estate plan.
How do you communicate your estate plan to your family and the key members as well?
That's a great question. One of the things that I tell people, because we tend to create an estate plan and we keep it a secret. Estate planning should not be a secret. First of all, when you're creating the estate plan, you should talk to your family. You should have conversations with your family about what your values are, what your goals are, why you're appointing people. And part of that is that helps to preserve family relationships. One of the biggest problems that we have when there's no estate plan is broken relationships. Like, you can replace the tangible things, but broken relationships you cannot. So I tell them to have a conversation with everybody. Give everybody the opportunity to express their feelings, especially you have times when a parent may want to be cremated and the kids are like, I'm not going to cremate you. Okay, if your kids are telling you they're not going to honor your wishes, that's not the person you want to appoint. And when you have multiple children, oftentimes we have parents that want to appoint all of their children as the power of attorney. When you have 4 or 5 people trying to make decisions together, that's creating a situation for chaos, right? And you're creating a situation for them to end up in court. So what you do is, when you're having the conversation, say, hey, I'm going to appoint her as the power of attorney because she lives in close proximity. I have like a checklist that I go through with my clients when they're choosing their agents. She lives in close proximity. She's more responsible. You frame the conversation in a way that everybody understands. Or if you have a family member that has like 5 kids and their schedule is always busy, maybe that's not the best person to appoint as the executor. So you sit around, everybody have the conversation. Hey, I know you have small kids, so I'm going to appoint, Lisa, because Lisa doesn't have any kids and this is a big responsibility. And that alleviates the assumptions, because you have children, I knew she liked you better, and then that causes, conflict within the relationships.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's extremely important in terms of just being executors and that communication piece, because I talked to quite a few wealthy families, and that's something they're always worrying about, is like, is this money that I'm going to be leaving going to harm my family, going to harm my children, from generation to generation? And then throughout their life, communicating those values, those family values, and why they make certain decisions in terms of what happens after they die or become incapacitated. Many talk about that type of importance. So.
To go back to the family conversations, one of the challenges that we have is that nobody wants to talk about estate planning because they're thinking about it as planning for my death. So I tell people, frame it in the context of your legacy. You're preserving your wealth, you're preserving your family relationships, and you're protecting everything that you own, and it's going to be distributed in the way that you want and not in the way that the state decides that it should be distributed.
Right. So everyone, I've been here with Kemlia Reed Sherman. Kemlia is the founding and managing partner of Reed Sherman Law Firm. It is a family law, estate planning, and probate firm that protects family relationships, secures their wealth, and also secures their legacy. You can find out more about her company at reedshermanlaw.com. That's reedshermanlaw.com. She actually has a special checklist that she's going to provide everyone who is here today. It's called the COVID checklist, but she can talk a little little bit more about that in 1 second. Please make sure you press the thumbs up button. Please make sure that you share and subscribe to the Black Financial channel if you would like to receive more financial content like the content that we're producing here today with Kemlia. If you would like to see a master lecture from Kim in the Black Business School about estate planning and all that goes along with it, please let us know, and we'll do our best to actually make that happen as well. So Kim, can you talk about this COVID checklist that you have, and also how people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your services?
Sure. The COVID checklist, after the pandemic started, people were dying and, their loved ones didn't know what to do. And there was a lot of chaos and confusion with regards to managing the affairs. So what I did was I put together the COVID checklist, and it identifies the foundational documents. It gives you more information with regards to what those documents are. And it also helps you to organize your important information. Because one of the challenges that we have, even when people have estate plans, finding it, people don't understand. It's like, I know she had a will, but I don't know where it's at. Did it get lost? And then in the case of Aretha Franklin, it was like weeks later or months later or however long that they found these documents that were supposed to be her will. So the COVID checklist kind of helps you to understand, the 4 foundational estate planning documents, and as well as getting your affairs in order, because you want to make sure that, your family members are going to have a difficult time emotionally. You don't want to exacerbate that by having to figure out, I knew she was in the military, but when, what date did she do this? Where's the insurance policy? Where's the will? That kind of stuff, so.
Got it. And how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, they can contact me at my website, readshermanlaw.com. And also they can join my Secure the Legacy Facebook group, where I provide lots of valuable information. I answer a lot, questions, I try to give the audience the opportunity to provide questions or topics that they want me to discuss. We break down the different types of trusts. We talk more in depth about, wills and the different documents. And we also have, talk about scenarios. If someone has, a situation, about, or something that they heard, because we rely on a lot of myths. And that's, kind of one of the issues. If there's something that they want me to clarify, then, I can answer those questions, as long as they're not personal questions, because that would constitute legal advice, and I'm not allowed to do that.
All right. And I put the link to Secure the Legacy Facebook group in the chat as well, so make sure you check that out also. So Kim, before we get out of here, I have 5 rapid fire questions for you, and answer them to the best of your ability. All right. Number 1, what is your favorite business book of all time?
The 5 Agreements. And it's not a business book, it's a mindset book. And in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to have the right mindset.
All right. Number 2. What's number 2? Oh yeah. Are there any CEOs or companies that you're currently following right now that you would like to emulate as you build your firm and in your business?
Lamar Tyler. Dr. Boyce, I follow Dr. Boyce. Of course, I can't think of the ones that I follow now, but there are quite a few. So, Dennis Kimbrough, I follow Dennis Kimbrough. I have, of course, I'm joining.
Yeah, no worries. Those are all great answers. Yep. Number 4. No, excuse me, number 3. Or you, I lost you for a second. What'd you say?
Warren Buffett.
Oh, Warren Buffett. Okay, perfect. Number 3, who is your favorite historical figure from Black history?
I would probably say, and I know this is going to sound kind of cheesy, I'm going to say Harriet Tubman.
Oh, that's not cheesy. That's one of our favorites too, with our audience. So, people love Harriet Tubman within the Black Business School and the Black Financial Channel. So, number 4, how many hours of sleep do you get at night?
I try to get 6 to 8. I was, when I was much younger and less wise, I thought that Team No Sleep was the way to go, but Team No Sleep is just not effective for me. It's not healthy for me, and I don't have the mental clarity when I don't get rest. So 6 to 8 hours.
Okay, and then the last question is, if you can go back in time, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
To believe in themselves. just to believe in themselves, and that their self-worth is not attached to their experiences nor their relationships to anyone. You
All
are,
right.
period.
Belief. That is one of the strongest things that any human can do, is actually to believe and believe in themselves. So awesome, Kim. So thank you so much for being a guest on the Black Financial podcast. Everyone, I've been talking to Kemlia Reed Sherman. Kim is the founder and managing partner of Reed Sherman Law Firm. It's a family law, estate planning, and probate firm that protects family relationships, secure their wealth, and also secure their legacies. You can find out more about her company at reedshermanlaw.com. That is reedshermanlaw.com. In the chat, I also put the COVID checklist for estate planning. So please make sure you check that out. It's a great free guide to help you and help your family during this time, and to make sure that your family's legacy and wealth are secure. Please, before you get here, make sure you press the thumbs up button. Please make sure that you share and also subscribe to the Black Financial channel as well. So on behalf of Kemlia, my name is Lawrence Watkins. You all take care, be blessed, and have a wonderful day. All right, bye-bye.